All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Right on, everybody. Come on. Please be seated. I'm overwhelmed by your affections. What a day it is going to be. Welcome from all around this great planet. We are a live show on 2 hours. I know, it's a long time.
What?
I would say sometimes it feels like a long time. Sometimes it feels like the time just flies. But I'm not sure which category it's going to fall into today. But I think we've got some pretty terrific people joining us. As usual, we have very smart people coming through. John Rothmann, bottom of the hour. He is the sage, the political and presidential historian. And then John Flannery will be here, top of the next hour. He, former federal prosecutor, hugely into Democratic politics, a brilliant, mind on legislation, and I think on this moment in time, he'll be a great guy to talk you off the ledge. He has some thoughts about America at this moment in time and the future. We'll also look at what's going on now in Washington. And it involves a meeting of the outgoing president and the incoming president. And we'll get to that in just a moment. I do want to thank everybody for your participation today. We've had some really cool communications from listeners, viewers. You can reach us at the Mark Thompson Show at gmail.com. I get the good and the bad, and that's okay.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
Yeah, we've gotten some positive. Usually I'll get positive, and then there's a but. Do you think you could do more? Whatever. So we're working on that. It's a work in progress. Already into the chat this morning, which is a live chat on YouTube. You don't have to be part of the live part. Most people take this show in on delay, and you can leave us comments and thoughts after hours in the delay. Wes says, hey, we are all terrific people joining you in the chat, too. You are terrific. Thank you, Wes. And OG is Wes, one of the original supporters of this show. So thank you for all the ways you join us. What I was mentioning is Ellen said early, she said, the Mark Thompson Show has helped me with the helplessness and lonely emotions I have since the election. Staff and listeners make me feel like there is a positive way forward. Well, there is a positive way forward. I'm flattered and also warmed by that comment, but there is a positive way forward. It's not all negative. And I would also say this to many people I know who have checked out and said, I don't want to see anything about politics. I don't want to see anything about the news right now. I just have to take care of myself. I totally respect that, but it's not my position. My position is I want to be very connected to what's going on right now. I think it is an obligation. Now, obviously, I have a professional obligation to be connected, but I would also applaud the notion that we should be connected to what's going on right now. Jim Slayton says, living the American pipe dream, baby. Yeah, right on. Thank you for the super chat, Jim, another OG of this show. Luis says, a puppy killer, tech bros, Fox weekend anchors, dude who is an appetizer for a brainworm. Please make Judge Janine AG to make the clown car complete.
Oh.
Luis is so right. These appointments are really whipping my head around. And we'll get to a list.
It's never been anything like this.
Boy, ain't that true. Today, just minutes ago, the incoming president, President-elect Trump, met with the sitting president, Joe Biden. You have that video, Albert?
It's a little awkward.
Yeah. Well, once you said somebody is completely out of it, doesn't know where they are. I mean, he's disparaged Biden in every possible way. Disparage is a ding word. The idea somehow you could sit down and be completely, but the idea is that, and Trump, I think, said this, hey, politics is a tough game. Great to be here,
That's what he said. Yeah, in the video,
yeah.
he said, politics is tough,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a little tougher the way Trump plays it. There he is, the two are shaking hands for the cameras. This is what Trump does best, is the photo ops, He's not a big one on policy. He's kind of a photo op guy. And he said,
Thank you.
there it is.
Thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yes, that scene was cordial.
Yeah, there.
And then,
Yeah,
and then President Biden takes a deep breath and looks away like, are we done yet?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Is this
I
over?
am.
Can I get out of here?
Yeah. Right.
Sayonara, sucker.
Yeah.
It's a
It was-
smooth transition. That's what we got.
Yeah. This
That's
is right.
Shaking
This
hands
is a
with
man
fire
with
in our mouth.
anger. This is a man that has resentment towards you.
Exactly. It was not it had to be chilly. Well, Melania didn't even go meet Jill. I don't, if I'm Jill, I'm breathing a sigh of relief. Why do you want to sit down with Melania Trump?
You don't.
For, give me shelter. I think she caught the best break and the best bounce on all of that. Anyway, that's what's going on in Washington right now. So there's
The Mark Thompson Show.
before that happened, what's that, Kim?
From what I understand, speaking of Melania Trump, according to multiple sources, she's not coming back as a full-time first lady. She's not moving back to Washington, D.C. She's,
Wow.
according to CNN, going to split her time between Palm Beach and Mar-a-Lago
Whoa.
and
What?
New York City, where her son Barron is going to college.
Oh, I thought
She's
she wanted
not-
to be closer to the classified documents down there in
You would think
Mar-a-Lago.
so. Guys, somebody
No.
has to keep watch over the bathroom.
Yeah.
But no, she's going to be at the White House for major events like state
Sure.
dinners.
Sure.
But other than that, she's not coming back full time. It
Wow.
will be the first time we've had like a part-time first lady.
Her new
What the
contract
hell is
not-
going on in the United States of America?
Her new contract states she doesn't have to. Okay.
Exactly. She's got a
We
good.
have processes and protocols and standards.
She'll be there for some of the processes and protocols, but nothing much.
Her new contract states probably, as long as you stay married to me for the next 4 years, you don't have to come live here. Right.
I think there was, widely reported information related to the fact that it had been renegotiated. I don't know if there is a
I don't
truth
know
to
if
that or
that's
not.
true
Debbie
either, yeah.
says, I loved your show since its beginning at KGO. Thanks for being willing to listen and understand. Yeah, Debbie sent me an interesting email along the last couple of months. She sent some emails that have really sort of spoken to policy and spoken to American politics, and I really love the interaction. So always love hearing from you, and I'm delighted that you found this show from KGO. We were born from a radio station. That's what KGO was. It was a huge radio station in the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, really massive signal all over the West, and with a rich tradition that goes back many, many years. Ron Owens, when he was on KGO, beat Rush Limbaugh every single rating book. It didn't matter how powerful Rush was. So anyway, we came from that station when that station went away, and we came here to YouTube. And then beyond YouTube, this is where we do the show live, we serve this up as an audio podcast across Spotify, across Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, et cetera, all the places that you generally mainstream-wise anyway get podcasts. So that's where we live now, and we're glad that all of our KGO and Bay Area listeners are able to make it over. Those who did, I know that there's still others who are kind of wandering in the wilderness, but this is where we are. And if you can share the word that we're here, that helps spread the footprint of the show and helps us in many ways as well. Please give updates on KFI and Bill Handel. Will they still be there, says Valerie. Also, Tim Conway and Gary and Shannon. This is in Southern California. There's a radio station, talk radio station called KFI. They just laid off their entire, eliminated their entire news department except for the news anchors. think the news is going to be handled out of a central location in Phoenix. So one of the great muscular aspects of KFI radio is the local news presence, and now there are no local news reporters working out of that place anymore. But all of the people you're asking about are going to be fine. Bill Handel and Tim Conway and Gary and Shannon, they're going to be fine. Doesn't affect them. So, but that's the state of the state there. And the reason that we particularly spend a heartbeat of time on it is that was our experience. First, they got the news department, then they begin to shed a couple of other people like producers like Albert. They eliminated his position, who's now with us now, on this show. And then, of course, they eliminate the station. They eliminate the hosts and the other news people, everybody left over, and they realize, hey, we can just run syndicated programming and we don't make as much money. We make, almost nothing, but we begin to, not have to deal with all the mechanics of running a station, and we now make money, which is sort of where. Anyway, that's the drill down on that. So thank you. Any other?
The Mark Thompson Show.
Any other questions? I'm happy to answer them as well. You can also reach me at themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com if you have questions about KFI or KGO or whatever, and I'm happy to answer those questions. Donald Trump has been busy with this list of people who are going to be inhabiting his new administration. Of course, we've known for a couple of days that he has named that Susie Wiles as the chief of staff, and she's got her act together. I mean, you can say what you want about Susie Wiles. In fact, I could say a few things about Susie Wiles. She has been an extremely effective political operative historically. I want to say Rick Scott is really her guy. She made Rick Scott into a senator from being just a businessman who ripped off the government in the biggest Medicare fraud in our nation's history. So she took Rick Scott, this businessman, and made him a senator. There she is. Now, she is immensely competent, and she did run the campaign for Donald Trump. She's a longtime Washington person and worked on the presidential campaigns of Reagan, for example, and George H.W. Bush. And out of the spotlight, she is doing a lot and continues to do a lot for Donald Trump. So she'll be the White House chief of staff. Stephen Miller will be the White House deputy chief of staff for policy. And of course, we know about Stephen Miller. Send the illegals back home. He said America is for Americans, all of that stuff. I mean, it's a very draconian view of immigration, and immigration is a nuanced issue, even if you understand, as we all do, that secure borders are an important thing. The way in which you can really cut off the illegal immigration stream, probably, and I've never said this before on this show, but it's of course obvious, is you need to have employer sanctions. People come here for economic opportunity, and they also are, believe me, fleeing many other, it used to be purely economic opportunity. Now they're fleeing many situations that are life-threatening to them, right? I mean, and now increasingly there are climate refugees, et cetera. But more to the point, if you are really serious about getting people out of this country who are working in the American system, in restaurants, in slaughterhouses, in agricultural concerns through the Central Valley, picking strawberries and everything else that they're the backbone of the agriculture business in California. If you were really serious about it, you would penalize the employers, not the employees. You would sanction the employers. Going in and raiding a slaughterhouse of a bunch of people who are here illegally, that's not really, and deporting them, that's not really an effective way to reduce immigration illegally to this country. So we know you're not serious about going after the people who own these businesses, right? Who own these huge mega farms, who own the slaughterhouses, who own the restaurants. You don't want to go after them. So you go in and you grab, Julio and Paco, you throw them on a bus, and now you take a victory lap. sorry, I think it's bad policy. But you may say, hey, Mark, we do need it. I agree. But my father actually was very instrumental in the 80s in crafting legislation about immigration that involved the sanction of employers. That's the only way to have a chilling effect on this. But the reality is something much different, isn't it, everybody? We all know what the reality is. The reality is you need these people. The reality is you are building your economy on the backs of these people, even as they hurt overall wages because they work for so much less. Employers are desperate for them for that same reason. Anyway, moving on, we can continue.
You had a lot of substance there with Miller. I just have, every time I see that guy, one word comes to mind, a feeling, and it's slime. He's slimy.
Yeah, he's doesn't have a lot to recommend him. He's definitely he's a hardliner with an ugly policy. So when you look at him and you can see ugly in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio will be Secretary of State. I mean, Marco Rubio is someone, in the Senate who has dealt with international relations, but I mean, he's a hardliner. He's also someone who disagrees with Donald Trump on Ukraine policy. So I'm sure, as an ass kisser, he'll come around to Donald Trump's way of seeing the world. But I'm just saying, if you really were looking at the underpinning philosophy of Marco Rubio, it's not in lockstep with Donald Trump's.
Whose wife did Trump make fun of? Was it Rubio's or Cruz's?
Ted Cruz, yeah.
And
Ted
so
Cruz.
it's Rubio. He just called him Little Marco, right?
Little Marco.
Yeah.
I mean, he humiliated. I sent you that though, Albert? Didn't I? I sent you the video of Marco Rubio on the stage with. I know I'm hitting you with this. We didn't talk about it, but I did send it to you. Marco Rubio on stage with Donald Trump at a campaign debate or something, in which he said, do you know what Donald Trump would be doing if he weren't given $200 million by his dad? He'd be selling watches on Fifth Avenue. That's what Marco Rubio said.
He's selling watches on eBay anyway.
Yeah,
or whatever.
But I'm just saying, these guys have come a long way from where they were. Elise Stefanik, the ambassador to the United Nations. And this is, again, these are loyalty appointments.
To be a diplomat to do that?
She has no diplomatic experience.
You don't have to be nice to people in other countries.
Very little foreign policy experience. This is a position, and you can say, hey, the United Nations isn't worth the real estate that it's built on. Okay. But if you're going to have an ambassador to the United Nations, usually they have some kind of diplomatic or foreign policy experience. She has very, very little. So that's a loyalty post. Tom Homan is the border czar. He is the former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And, there was no border czar. There is no position of border czar. They gave Kamala Harris that title, border czar. And they wanted to tag her with everything that was a problem at the border, right? So now they call Homan the border czar to contrast essentially Kamala Harris and Homan. It's a way to kind of own the libs in another way because he's so hardline. Now, he does have experience because he was director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, so he has some, as I say, experience at the border and with border policy. But he is someone who is quoted as saying that Democratic governors who obstruct his efforts to raid and deport should get the hell out of the way, warning of unnamed consequences if they don't.
People are scared.
I see why.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Zeldin, because I'm a tree hugger, this is something that I pay a lot of attention to, who runs the EPA. But you may not be a tree hugger, but you may, I don't know if you drink water or breathe air, but if you drink water or breathe air, you should care who runs the EPA. You should care about the fact that the Supreme Court overturned that Chevron deference case, which was the way in which the EPA had the stout legal control of regulations on air and water toxins. What can go into the air and water and your soil? That is controlled by the EPA. And this guy, Lee Zeldin, is the new EPA administrator. He has been a congressperson from New York, and he is going to be charged with, and Trump has said this, passing fair and swift deregulatory decisions. He is someone who is very much in the thrall of business and of deregulation. When asked about the environment, he talked about U.S. energy dominance and the American auto industry and how regulation has to be removed from those areas of business. Well, that is not the environment, okay? Oil drilling and the auto industry is not the environment. What you can do for the environment through the EPA is done through regulation, protections on water and on air toxins. And I'll remind you, in the first Trump administration, the water levels were reaching critical thresholds with toxins. And the Trump administration said they weren't meeting the clean water standards that the federal government had laid down. And what did the Trump administration do? They said, no problem, we'll just raise those thresholds. So now whatever toxins are in there still don't exceed the federal thresholds, and you guys are fine. That's the kind of thing you can look forward to. They will give you the crap about how we have the cleanest water on Earth, we have the cleanest air on Earth. It's just not, A, it's not true, and B, it's going to be further degraded with this appointment. Mike Waltz is the National Security Advisor. He is a retired Army National Guard officer, war veteran. I think the big story is Kristi Noem. She's going to run the Department of Homeland Security. You know her because she was probably going to be on a final approach course to be Donald Trump's running mate, I'd suggest.
And then the whole dog shooting incident delayed that, derailed that. Yeah.
Exactly. She had a little hiccup when she wrote in her book how she delighted and even bragged after killing the puppy. You know, it was a year and a half old, I believe. You know, that's a bad brag in pretty much any forum, but when you're running for public office, it's a really bad brag. No contendo, unqualified folk hired. Others call this DEI. Oops. Yeah, right, exactly. How many of these posts are DEI hires? And you could argue this is one. So she has no experience here. I have no idea what the hell Kristi Noem is doing in this game, except for the fact that she was such a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. And she's going to be working with Stephen Miller as the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. I mean, it's a huge job. And again, I'll remind you that this is someone who, even within South Dakota, and South Dakota is not a populous region. I mean, it's a small state from the standpoint of the number of people who live there. She was banned from entering indigenous tribes' land. That's about 20% of the state of South Dakota. She was banned because she baselessly started accusing tribal leaders of cooperating with Mexican drug cartels. That was one of the accusations she made, a very high profile. And literally, the indigenous people who live in South Dakota, they're not small in number. They clapped back, and she got that ban.
So she's crazy then.
She's also, and this you may feel as though it's a little salacious, but you may like salacious. She was having, and maybe you can get me information on this, Kim or Albert, you're really good with the salacious stuff. I'd say Kristi Noem and her affair with Corey Lewandowski is something you want to look at. And the reason I say you want to look at it is not just because it's sort of tee-hee, they're having an affair. You know, I don't really care about that. You have as many affairs as you want. Corey Lewandowski was basically nailing everybody in the White House. He was, there were like a list of these women who he was going nuts with, which is, hey, great. I mean, if you can work it in between whatever other crap you were doing, great. But what I point to is the way in which, as Secretary of Homeland Security, she can shovel a bunch of stuff to Corey Lewandowski. I mean, she can shovel contracts. She can shovel all kinds of. There are all kinds of ways in which you can enrich certain people when you're director of Homeland Security. We talked a bit about it yesterday. The no bid contracts, where you just sort of assign contracts to various people and entities. I'd look for a lot of that from this administration. So that's the deal on Kristi Noem. Mike Huckabee, of course, ambassador to Israel. I think you saw a picture of him, and so on. I mean, again,
I was reading something about him, Huckabee. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Was it Huckabee or what? One of them? They think Palestine, the Palestinians aren't real, like Palestine didn't exit. Something
well, I mean,
that.
I think they have I think that is Huckabee's general disposition.
Yeah.
I think he has a what you might want to call it a religious right vision of the Middle East, and I think he wouldn't be viewed at minimum as sort of a neutral arbiter of some kind of resolution when it comes to disputes involving countries and entities, religious entities in that region. So,
for all the people, though, for all the Arab Americans who decided that, you know, they didn't like the policy, the Israel-Gaza conflict policies of the United States and the Biden administration, thinking that they were going to have a protest vote, I think what they just got is something worse than what they had.
Well, and that was one you could see. Like I said it on this show multiple times. I mean, I get it. You want a protest vote. You kind of had that protest vote in the primary there, and I put primary in quotes. But I don't see how if you're an Arab American who care about that region, you vote. I get it. Both sandwiches are awful, but you really decided on the S sandwich more than the other sandwich. This is a far more, if you only care about Palestinians and Palestinian causes, this is a far more toxic choice than was a vote for Kamala Harris. Yeah. And finally, the CIA director is this guy, John Radcliffe. He, I think during Trump's first term, he was the National Intelligence Director. So he's someone who has some experience. Anyway, we'll obviously review more as these appointments come in. And go ahead.
I just saw a comment, retired 4-star general talking about the defense secretary nomination being this Fox News anchor.
Yeah, let's get to that real quick before we get to John Rothmann. Pete Hegseth, is that his last name?
Yeah.
So I've been watching him for years on Fox, and let's just take a moment, because I remember
The Mark Thompson Show.
Donald Trump's nominee to run the Defense Department is Pete Hegseth from Fox News. I mean, it's not like Fox News occupies a small part of his resume. It's really what he's been doing for a while now. And I know that's what you want in somebody who's going to run the Defense Department, is you want somebody who can read that teleprompter really well. But Hegseth isn't someone without any credentials. He just seems overmatched by the job of running the whole effing Defense Department. Do you know how many people, how many assets you have to manage? This is an administrative job of immense proportion. And I don't see anything in his resume which would suggest that he has managed anything. I mean, he's managed to get on Fox News as a weekend anchor, and clearly he's someone who, lavishing praise on Donald Trump and being a loyal media supporter of Donald Trump, has ingratiated himself to the point that now he is going to be running the Defense Department. Here's a retired 4-star general on this nomination. Quote, there's no serious experience in the business of running the Pentagon or the national security staff processes, but I'm trying to retain an open mind and hope that fresh ideas could improve things that can get pretty stale. That said, the common denominator is clearly loyalty, and while some loyalty is essential, slavish fealty is dangerous. Looking at all the announcements to date, we could end up with one mind controlling many hands. And I've never believed that one mind, any mind, does that as well as diversity of thought. That's from a 4-star general on the defense secretary nomination. Do you, Albert, before I get to Rothmann, do you have the videos that I sent you? Here is Pete Hegseth. And the thing I remembered was, go ahead and just roll it. I remember they did this thing this is on the street in New York. It's a crowded street, and he's doing an axe throwing thing, and he throws the axe over the backboard. Oh, here, at the beginning, show it again, Albert. Yeah, it hits the marchers from behind. So you see how he's throwing at the target, but bam, it hits that. Yeah, it hits the guy who's the drummer. I just remembered that. It was a weird thing. I don't know why it lodged in my memory. It was just such a strange thing, and we found the video for you. And there he is talking to the guy that he'd hit with the axe. And so it was on. There it is again. Yeah. So yeah, that's,
the guy's lucky he didn't take a blade to the face.
Yeah, it hit the blunt side of the axe hit him. So that's Pete Hegseth. Now you can say, look, it was just, and it obviously was just a thing. But he also has said a couple of things that are controversial, and I just want to play a couple of them for you now. They're only like 15 seconds long. Give me the, this is one about women in the military. Go ahead, please, Albert.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated. We've all served with women, and they're great. It just, our institutions don't have to incentivize that in places where not traditionally, over human history, men in those positions are more capable.
Yeah, so that's his view of women in the military. Now, look, this is a guy who was in the Army National Guard. He served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and was in Guantanamo Bay. So he's one of these guys who doesn't come without any experience. But what I'd suggest is you have to manage a lot of people. Those kinds of things that you say, that puts you in an odd disposition towards administrating that staff. Do I have one more Pete Hegseth thing, and then I want to bring on John?
I don't think I've washed my hands for 10 years.
Yeah, here he is.
Really, I don't really wash my hands.
Someone help me!
No, I inoculate myself. It's just not, germs are not a real thing. I can't see them. Therefore, they're not real.
So you're becoming immune to all the
exactly.
bacteria.
I can't get sick.
All right. So, look, that could be just happy talk. I mean, again, I've worked in news and been in those happy talk situations, and you say a bunch of stuff. But the point is, he's a media darling, good-looking guy. I think Trump really is attracted to people who are attractive. And I think he's overmatched by this job. But, look, defense secretary is huge. Trump's DEI, dumb employee inclusion, says Luis. Ain't it the truth? All right, Vilma says the new Trump administration appointments, no experience required, just loyalty to Trump. Yeah, there is a significant truth to just that point. And I guess we'll get Rothmann to weigh in on that as well. All right, so.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It is with great pleasure that we welcome this guy in on Wednesdays. He is the Sage, our former colleague. He's a presidential historian, lecturer, and he has his own podcast called Around the Political World with John Rothmann. He is John Rothmann. Hey, John.
Hi, Mark.
So what do you make of this first preparatory week that Trump has put in place with these appointments that are coming out?
Well, if you remember the expression, the Reagan Revolution, which was tantamount in people's minds in 1981, we are now in the middle of the Trump Revolution. He is going to remake the American government, whether it is with a Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk and Ramaswamy, whether it is by the nature of his nominees. This is Donald Trump's game, and he is going to play it the way he wants.
You mentioned Ramaswamy and you mentioned Musk. they both strike me, they're tech bro people. Musk has existing government contracts that are enormous. I mean, the SpaceX relationship, the X relationship, the Twitter relationship, and even some relationships with other technologies that Musk is in a connection with the American government. In other words, he has contracts with them. Now he's in that same government, and he's called upon to get rid of efficiencies and get rid of inefficiencies and explore further efficiencies. Explain to me the complexity of that role, a guy like Musk with existing contracts with the U.S. government.
There is no formal appointment process. Donald Trump is setting up his own independent commission, just like the Grace Commission, which was during the Reagan years. And this is how Donald Trump is going to govern. He won. He won overwhelmingly. He won the popular vote. He won the electoral vote. He controls both houses of Congress. He has fealty from both the new Senate Majority Leader, Senator Thune, and also from the Speaker of the House, Speaker Johnson. And he believes that the Supreme Court is in his hands as well. So for Donald Trump, there are no restraints. There is no effort. Now, let me just point out to you that one of the things Donald Trump wanted was for the Senate to suspend the confirmation process and allow for recess appointments, which goes around the whole question of going through hearings. That, by the way, is what John Bolton experienced when he was ambassador to the United Nations. There was no hearing. He got a recess appointment. That is what Donald Trump is doing. And I can't emphasize this enough. This is like a wheel with a spoke in the middle who makes all the moves, and that's Donald Trump. Let me assure you the difference between now and 8 years ago is that Trump now understands the levers of power, and he's going to exercise them. And that's why I believe this is the Trump revolution.
Well, the Trump revolution may mean a lot. By the way, it's the hub would be in the center of the wheel, John, and the spokes would come out of the hub. Let's get our goddamn references straight. All right, now.
I spoke too soon.
Oh, I love it. That's our Rothmann. That's our Rothmann. John, when you talk about Trump's vision of government, we've heard a lot of stuff on this, and so I don't know if Trump's vision of government is really a coherent one. I mean, he's got a lot of slogans, and he's got a presidency, I think, based on sloganeering. But I'm wondering what his real underpinning philosophy is. I mean, is it the Bannon philosophy of wanting to deconstruct essentially the administrative state, all those regulatory agencies from EPA to consumer? Yeah, okay.
But look, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He understands what he experienced, and he is determined to make sure that in this administration, he's in charge. And trust me when I tell you this, I'm watching Donald Trump carefully, but there are no restraints on Donald Trump. None at this moment.
Yeah, he does have great political capital, John, so he can do almost anything he wants to do. And of course,
that is correct.
Supreme Court's given him all that additional running room. Questions for John Rothmann are already coming in. I will grab one of them now. Somebody trolling you. I don't know. You know, it's interesting. I didn't even remember what Rothmann's prognostication was on this. People's Republic of Santa Monica says Rothman's such a great prognosticator on the election results. What was your prognostication? I don't even remember what it was.
I said we were in a very tight race. I agreed with the pollsters. And I said last week on your program, or 2 weeks ago, it depends on who turns out. If the Trump people turned out, he would win. And one of the things we learned in this election is that women did not turn out in large numbers. Millions of Californians did not vote in this election. And the Trump people were highly motivated. So, I'm not claiming to be right or wrong. I'm only saying I really believed it would be a close election. And I think I referred to my son, Joel, who informed me before the election that Trump was going to win. And I said, why do you think that? He said, all my friends are voting for Trump.
You know, you said that he's won in an overwhelming way or a dominant fashion. I get why you said that, and I get that he won the popular vote. But let's face it, it was razor thin still. I think the whole thing came down to
Doesn't matter.
175,000.
We can go back and talk about razor thin. He will be the president. He will make the appointments, and he has the votes in the Senate and the House to do pretty much what he wants. No one is going to oppose him.
I think it's the second part of what you said that's the most, I think, the most important, which is that he's got a congressional backing now that, you know, he will allow him to do whatever he wants. Wouldn't that be even more significant than were he just to be elected?
And the interesting thing is the three key contenders for the nomination for the leadership of the Republicans all were willing to give him carte blanche. There was a time when no senator, self-respecting senator, would have agreed to yield the confirmation process. Yet all three contenders for the leadership said they would. Cronin, Senator Thune, who won, and of course, Senator Scott of Florida. All were willing to cede that responsibility. It is astounding to me. That's all I can tell you.
This from BW Rock with a $10 super chat. 2025 word of the year, kakistocracy, which a kakistocracy is a government run by the worst, least qualified, or most unscrupulous citizens. As you see this Trump government unfolding, is it a kakistocracy, John Rothmann?
It is Trump's government. That means that in 2 years during the midterms, the American people will judge the success or failure of Donald Trump. He is going to claim full credit. And let me explain to you, he deserves it. No one expected this kind of monumental triumph. And let me point out to you, you can slice it and dice it. He's in control. And may I point out as well, when it comes to judicial nominations, he will have the Senate. And if there are vacancies on the courts, whether it is the Supreme Court or the federal courts or the appellate courts, he will have the votes to confirm the people that he wants. Loyalty is critical to him. He's said it over the years many times, and no one should doubt that that is Donald Trump's modus vivendi. Next question.
Next question relates to something you just talked about, which is the courts. Joe Biden is still president, and the Democrats still control the Senate. What's happening with these judicial appointments? They have a period during which apparently there are 30 judicial appointments I was reading the other day that are still kind of waiting to get into the pipeline.
And let me tell you, Chuck Schumer until January 3rd. And remember, the presidential term doesn't expire until January 20th, but Congress shifts on January 3rd. So Chuck Schumer, as the Senate Majority Leader, is going to do everything he can between now and January 3rd to get those nominations through. The Republicans will resist, but he has the votes.
So he is going to do everything.
Because of course.
All right. I mean, all right. I'm hoping to see that evidence of that.
You don't have to hope. He has said they're going to get these judicial nominations through. Period.
Okay, Kim.
I heard two things, and I can't confirm them, but I heard one that Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice, might be considering stepping down. He's older now, but he wouldn't do it
unless... He's in his late 70s, and there would be no reason for him to step down. He, in fact, feels completely vindicated. And if he steps down when Trump becomes president, someone like Thomas will replace him.
There were also rumblings of health issues for Justice Sotomayor. And now she can't step down. She's got to stay in now, right?
Yep. She has diabetes. Yeah. She is not going to step down. If she did, I don't believe they could force through a confirmation between now and the new Congress.
Oh, so you're saying they were kind of hamstrung just by timing in this case?
Absolutely. And look, let me point out to you that Mr. Smith chose to resign rather than be fired, but he is obligated to write a report. Will the Republicans bury that report? I can't tell you.
Phineas says, Mark, ask Rothmann about the pogroms in Amsterdam. What is happening in Amsterdam, John Rothmann?
The hatred of Jews is monumental. I must tell you, I was shaken to my core. I was in Amsterdam 3 months ago, a liberal, tolerant city. The Jews of Amsterdam are terrified. By the way, this is now spreading to Sweden, where they're also having incidents. And it was a pogrom, an assault on Jews, directed at Jews because they are Jews. And I talked to a friend of mine, a Jew who lives in Amsterdam. They are terrified. May I also indicate to you that America is pro-Israel. But let me point out that the new lineup that Donald Trump is putting in place, including Governor Mike Huckabee, who will be ambassador, are very, very, very pro-Israel. They're in line with the Netanyahu philosophy. It will mean a tremendous change in America's approach to Israel. And I believe that you will find that if Marco Rubio becomes Secretary of State, certainly with John Ratcliffe at the CIA, that there is no doubt that in Israel there was general rejoicing, not over Trump's domestic policy, but over his commitment to Israel. Remember that in this country, Jews overwhelmingly voted for Harris, about 78%, I believe, the latest number I heard. But in the traditional community in New York, Trump made major gains. He was recognized for his accomplishment in moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, his recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, his statements clearly that Jewish settlement in the West Bank is legal, and all of these, and his aggressive stance on Iran, declaring again before the election that Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. For Benjamin Netanyahu, who is under a lot of political pressure, the victory of Donald Trump was a major accomplishment in terms of his policy direction. So these are things we're going to watch carefully. Remember that the Saudi crown prince was in Iran. They are traditionally enemies, but he is banking on backing Iran in all of this. So we'll have to see how this all sorts out. But I'll be speaking tonight on the new American approach to the Middle East. It is a profoundly different approach than Joe Biden's. Let me be clear. Joe Biden calls himself a Zionist, is pro-Israel, no question about it. But Trump is emphatically going to work with Benjamin Netanyahu in a positive, constructive way in their way of doing things in the Middle East.
Well, positive, constructive way. I mean, you've got radical guys, you know, their notion of positivity may not jive with general notions.
You understand that our view, and I say this because most of us supported Kamala Harris, most of us opposed Donald Trump. Our view did not prevail in the election. And certainly, Donald Trump is not in the mainstream of San Francisco thinking for sure. Let me explain, Mark. I am deeply troubled by what is happening with Donald Trump. Make no mistake. But I also understand that that is how the American process works. A new administration is able to define policy and direction, sometimes against the establishment, if you will. I predict that there will be more and more comment on the Middle East. And if you go back and you take a look at Mike Huckabee's record, you will understand why.
Mark, Daniel says, I remember this now. Daniel Zachary says, Mark, I love your show. Quick question for John Rothmann today. Does he still believe and have confidence in the American people? Remember, John, how you said, and you and I disagreed about this. I told you I didn't have confidence in the American people. You said, I've got confidence in the American people that they're going to make the right choice. He's asking, do you change that position now? You still have confidence?
Yes. I believe the American people make a decision and they can recognize error. But in the meantime, Donald Trump will be judged in the midterms on what he accomplishes. And Donald Trump is determined. He already knows he's a lame duck. But he has 2 years to push through what he wants. He's going to do it. By the way, you've not mentioned J.D. Vance. Let me be very clear about this. J.D. Vance is in the position of very likely succeeding Donald Trump in control of the Republican Party. We have not examined J.D. Vance to the extent that we need to look at him. But I can tell you, he is going to be a key player in everything that happens in this administration.
Well, that's of great concern. Take a glass of water while I read you this one. This is Brian, who says, please ask John, how bad is this going to be, and whether we will still be intact enough in 2 years, knowing all of his moves will be disasters. Will we be able to turn this mess around, asks Brian Wright.
The answer is what I discussed with my children. The American system will prevail. We have guardrails. And also we have people in positions who understand. Let me tell you what I am concerned about. Have you heard about the Warrior Board? This is a new committee being set up by Donald Trump to eliminate generals, 4- and 3-star generals who are not in sympathy with what he's doing. In the Pentagon itself, there is a major concern and reformation taking place. The question of how the American military will be used. By the way, I'm going to watch carefully. You know that Donald Trump threatened to bring General Milley back to the service after he retired for the purpose of establishing a court-martial.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting to see whether or not Donald Trump fulfills those kinds of comments.
I have trouble understanding how those two things can coexist. The notions that you've just offered, which are associated with these military tribunals that may be impaneled and bringing Milley back, and this kind of
mass expulsions.
Mass expulsions, exactly, a cleansing of the administration of anyone who doesn't pass the loyalty test, et cetera. And then, but you preceded it by saying, I do still have faith there are guardrails in place. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding those guardrails now, John.
Okay, let me explain. If I did not have faith in the American system, I would be in complete despair. We survived Richard Nixon. We survived Iran-Contra. We've survived many difficult moments. I have to believe. Look, I love this country, and I want this country to survive and prosper. And Donald Trump has won an election fairly and democratically. By the way, you'll note there was no statement of any kind that fraud was committed in this election. And so you've got to have faith. Otherwise, what are we here for? We just be in despair. I won't live in despair.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's despair. I don't know if it's the only option, but I understand why you say it. Elon's first efficiency report, quote, "It will be the most efficient if you turn total control over to me." Seriously, Skynet is just a nickname. I am not a bot. Yeah, it is true, John, that this the tech bro invasion is pretty wild, and
it's terrifying.
Yeah,
it's terrifying. Running a business is not the same as running the government. And when you talk about major changes in the Pentagon, look, we now have a nominee, Mr. Hegseth, to be the
Hegseth,
Secretary of Defense. He has no experience running a major operation. And let me tell you, that is what the Pentagon is.
It's huge. It's immense.
Hegseth as the nominee is astounding to me. It made sense when John F. Kennedy put a Republican, McNamara, who had experience with the Ford Motor Company, in a position of being Secretary of Defense. But this is all stuff that's going to have to be vetted, and the American people have now cast their lot with Donald Trump. For 2 years, we are going to have to watch carefully, and frankly, given his control of Congress, there is very little we'll be able to do for those of us in opposition.
Well,
I mean, I don't want to paint a dark picture, Mark, but I want to paint a realistic picture.
No, I get it, and it's realistically dark. I get it. Finally, this is from No Contendo, who says Keith Olbermann on Monday covered the La Savita Lewandowski thing, putting up print hit with Lewandowski putting out a print hit on La Savita, but he squashed it. La Savita said, quote, "I will destroy you." So internal conflicts are already existing in this Trump administration. Wilds is going to get dragged in. Susie Wild, she's the, as you know, the chief of staff. And I'm also of the thought, John, that, this town ain't big enough for both of us is going to be something that we're going to see a lot of in this Trump administration.
And in the end, Mark, who is the final arbiter? Donald Trump. Nobody else will make these decisions. Donald Trump is in complete control, and therefore he will be held accountable, whether he succeeds or fails. And remember that Trump this morning, and you have the picture up there now, had a meeting with Joe Biden. It was respectful. And what was Joe Biden trying to emphasize? The peaceful transfer of power. which happened 4 years ago despite Donald Trump.
Randy says, I'm surprised Trump didn't ask Biden to kneel to him when they met. Trump is entirely classless. I mean, it is true, John. He hasn't pursued this with any kind of sense of decorum.
No, but that's part of the problem of Donald Trump. So I believed strongly that the American people after January 6th would never turn to Donald Trump again. And they have. And what do you do in a democracy? You accept the judgment of the people, even if you believe that judgment is wrong.
Yeah. John, I'll recommend your podcast again, Around the Political World with John Rothmann. It's a daily offering, and you can get John's reflections on everything going on. I think, as I said to you in the first hour, there is so much going on. I encourage you to listen and not to check out. So
no, absolutely. And Mark, I will be with you next week, but I want to alert you to the fact that the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I will not be available. And I just wanted to let you know that now. But look, people ask me, am I in despair? The answer is no. I am eternally optimistic. I have hope. And one of the things that you do and I do is to provide that forum for people to participate in the discussion. So I'm not in despair. I have to believe, because if I don't, I really would be lost.
Yeah, there you go. John Rothmann, everybody. Thank you, John. We'll talk next week, sir.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Rothmann, kind of a mix of things today, I thought, guys. You know what I mean? He's got that don't despair thing, but then he kind of leans into telling you how desperate the situation is.
I know. Well,
but don't despair. Donald Trump will have total control over our government, and he will decide the future. And
scary.
No one can do anything with total control of the Senate and the House of Representatives. No one can do anything. And the Supreme Court, he'll have that too. He's going to crush our life on this planet. But don't despair.
Well, yeah.
I love my Rothmann. I know what he was saying. I'm kind of just making it cartoonish, but I know what he's saying. And that's kind of what I'm saying too. Stay engaged. Stay very much engaged in what's happening.
Well, what's the the other option? You wallow in fear and pity and cower in your house? I mean, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
You've got to pick a road and go on it, you know?
Mr. Lord Beavis says, this is ridiculous. So what is this? Trump won, and now we have to just give up and let him do what he wants? He's been charged with treason. And we're just supposed to hope we won't do anything. He won't do anything bad. He hasn't been charged with treason, by the way. But I understand your point. I mean, he's certainly guilty of a coup with fake electors and an angry mob turned loose. So I mean,
in a normal democracy, you would have Democrats saying, okay, well, we're going to do what we can, right? You've got guys like Gavin Newsom who are trying to Trump-proof their state. You would have people in the House of Representatives trying to figure out how they can block things. People in the Democrats in the Senate figuring out how they can, be an obstacle for during the Trump years. But with Trump saying, anyone who gets in my way is,
right.
I will seek revenge upon you, and a big question mark as to whether you're going to end up in some prison somewhere, some dark room. It's created a little bit of fear that maybe it's, people will be rolling over and just kind of laying flat so that they don't get hurt.
Yeah. I like this no contendo comment about filibuster, just because there is the filibuster. There are certain governmental levers that are still in place. But I also think that there are a lot of levers or natural restrictions that would be associated with the control of either body of Congress that are not in place. So even as they continue to count ballots in California. Cassandra says, Dr. Trump has the scalpel. Now he is going to operate. Will the patient survive? Yeah, I mean, I think all of these parallels really do apply, and it is all about loyalty. I wonder if I could get, I don't know if I can get, when is Flannery coming through? What time?
It should be here any minute.
Okay, so I don't know if I have time for, let me do maybe a quick law and disorder, Albert. Does that sound reasonable? Because I really wanted to get some law and disorder in, and then we'll get to Flannery. Is that cool with you, buddy?
Albert, thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, so without any further delay, here's some law and disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Well, Jack Teixeira, that Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked classified information, sentenced to 15 years in prison. Happened just yesterday. He's 22 years old, accused of exposing details of American surveillance of adversaries and allies. He did it on the social media platform Discord. It increased diplomatic tension with some U.S. partners, raised some concern about undermining Ukraine's fight against Russia. He has been sentenced, and again, 15 years in prison is going to be a slow ride for that dude. A federal judge has blocked Louisiana's 10 Commandments law in public schools. A coalition of Louisiana parents who are trying to block this state law that would require the 10 Commandments to be displayed in public school classrooms by next year have won that legal battle in federal court. And Chris Wallace is leaving CNN. He left Fox 3 years ago.
What?
Yeah. He's announced...
Can you let him finish, sir?
Yeah, he's announcing that he's leaving CNN. He's getting into... Anybody? What is Chris Wallace getting into? He could just sit on stacks of money and live in the Hamptons for the rest of his life if he wanted to. But he wants to get into something. And it is streaming and podcasting. Yes, of course.
Welcome to the party.
That's what all the cool kids are doing. And finally, a cruise line has offered a 4-year journey for Americans who are mourning the Trump win.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
It's called the Skip Forward Package, and it was put out there a day after Trump won. It's part of the Via V residencing. I guess they have a series of different programs. Residents have the flexibility to join this journey at any port during a continuous global adventure. But you can have that spot on the boat for 4 years, never having to live in this country, if you will, for 4 years, the expected length of the Donald Trump term. According to the company, the 4-year package costs anyone. How much does a 4-year package on board this ship to avoid a Trump presidency? Quickly, because I have a real guy waiting. I have a smart person waiting, but we'll quickly do this.
I'm going to say 800,000.
800,000 is the guess for to be a guest.
4 years, 200,000 a year, right?
I'm seeing 250, 400,000 from John Watson, 100,000 from Karen Cooper for a 4-year stay on board this vessel to get away from a Donald Trump presidency and administration. 256,000. Says Rob. The answer is, clearly Rob Googled it, 255,999.
That's a bargain. 4 years? Wow.
Yeah, well, it's a bargain. Maybe look into it, Kim. That is Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on the Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Yeah. Nothing's easy around here, you know, even getting away for 4 years.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I thought you'd like to hear from someone who I think is a really, really smart guy. I'm really a fan of his takes, and after the election, I saw him do one of these things that he does now. You'll recognize him and you'll know him immediately when I bring him on because he's all over television, punditry world, etc. But he also does these kind of walks where he just reflects on things. And in the day after the Trump win and sort of in the ashes of the Democratic loss, I, went and just watched his reflections. And oddly, I thought he made me feel a little bit better in some way. He contextualized the country in a way. And I thought, why not get him on here to, share a little bit of that with you and just get his take on things. He's a former New York federal prosecutor, special counsel to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. He's an author, he's a lecturer, he's a trial lawyer, and that's just a piece of it. I just broad-stroked his great resume. How about it, the NBC News contributor, John Flannery, everyone.
Hello, glad to be with you.
Look at yeah, really, really cool to have you here. Cool. John, it's been a tough week for us who sort of we'd viewed Donald Trump as such a toxic figure, at minimum. I mean, leaving Kamala Harris out of the equation, but such a toxic figure, so hateful, so inept, so impulsive. We'd been through 4 years of his chaos that we really didn't think that our fellow Americans were going to spark to this guy. He didn't have any policy, really. He just had a bunch of bumper sticker slogans. And yet he won in pretty impressive fashion when you add the popular vote in as well. Give me your thoughts about this country in this moment.
Well, people are still trying to get out of the fetal position, those who opposed this character.
Sadly, yes.
Yes. So now we have a felon in the White House convicted of such instead of just accused of such. And there are several ways to read the votes, but let's first give him the credit. The credit is that there's an overwhelming vote for Trump. What is the significance of that to America? And I think the answer is, if this is a legitimate vote, then what you have is it means Americans are comfortable with discrimination. They're comfortable with limiting women's rights. They're comfortable with a whole variety of things that some of the leaders of my party, thinking of myself as a genetic Democrat, are telling us, just sit down and work with them. Well, how do I work with someone that would rather let children be killed in a school than have safety rules for guns? So we have this inapposite existence between what we believe, which is right, and which is wrong, and being told to go along. And I don't think that that's the way to go. I do not. Now, are the numbers legitimate? That waits for another day. But Democrats beating themselves up for having been right and asking themselves how they can now get closer to what we know is wrong is a way to go forward. That cannot be true for the vitality of our democracy and for our republic. But there are some saying that. And this leads us to, if there's a problem with the opposition, it's cowardice and a failure to use the tools that the founders gave us. We didn't impeach this guy in the sense of convicting him twice. The second time, he was trying to overthrow the government. And whatever happened to that vestige of control and power that a Senate has, and to give it back to this guy. And even now, as you and I talk, they're approving the new leader of the Republican Party in the Senate. And they're asking him, that is Trump and his minions are asking him to, hey, you don't have to advise and consent us on the nominees I'm pumping out day by day. Just let it go through. When you guys are in recess, in the dark of night, I'll approve all these guys and they'll be in place for at least 2 years. The nation cannot sustain that. I mean, to choose one issue, is the nation going to allow these guys to throw out our entire national defense, to have different people in places at a time when the world is looking at us and thinking about, can they test us? And this is the time to test us if we're going from where we were to chaos. So looking back on it, I believe every person who struggled to prevent this man from becoming the president and occupying the West Wing is a patriot. I am upset that our leadership does not show themselves to have courage to use the tools, impeachment, bar a person from running for office, trying to overthrow the government, resisting prosecutions. Our attorney general is asleep all the time, and he's a contributor to the fact that we didn't address this issue in the first 2 years instead of waiting till now. So I've run on a little bit. one thing you said, which was very nice to hear you say, which is that you felt calmer listening to me talk about some of these hateful things. And I've gotten the same response when I've done these. I guess it's mostly on YouTube, but I put links to it and people listen to it. And what I find is there is a disparity between what they're hearing from media and what, when I say it and others like me say it, is reality. Now, one of the reasons I like your show is because I think you cut through the BS. I tell people my greatest strength and my greatest weakness is my clarity of expression. If there's anything you and I share, as little as I know you, that's it. And that people are hungry for that because of all the nonsense they talk about.
We
So,
have
sorry.
I love that whole run. I do think that we have packaged everything, and media has typically packaged the news, opinion, etc. And sometimes it's hard to. We also, I think, in the media tend to both sides everything to try to be perfectly fair. And sometimes they're not both sides to the kind of corruption and the kind of misinformation and propaganda that we've been dealing with. It's just, but sadly, the media is caught in that both sidesism. I also think, sadly, John. And I focus on the media and mention the media a lot here, not always in a disparaging way, but because those issues that people respond to are issues they hear about. They hear about them in different ways, and they say that shouldn't be happening. And that is delivered to them through TikTok, through YouTube, through all of these other sort of alternative media sources, and through Fox News Channel, probably the greatest Republican propaganda machine ever. And those people who watch Fox News Channel, they vote. But as it turns out, it wasn't just the Fox News Channel voters, probably, in this election, was it, John?
No, it was not. And you see, they talk about Roman times, they have games, and a lot of those games are pretty brutal. And what Trump does best, and which is the worst for us, is he finds the weak point. LBJ was notorious for being able to find the pressure point on an individual for a vote. And if you ever seen some of the old photographs, he was a tall man and he'd lean over a senator he's trying to persuade. It's a classic photograph. And so what we have is we have him finding something. Like everybody thought, you knock Puerto Rico and the people there, it's going to hurt you in Pennsylvania. But I think that what Trump was playing to was he was playing to those from Puerto Rico who are citizens here and who do not want other Puerto Ricans coming to challenge them for their jobs and their income and things like that. And they have been convinced it's a zero-sum game. If there's a conversation with them, it is that this is about both the color of your skin and your origin, which is un-American. And the same thing is true about the notion of if you're a person of color in America and you live in a city, you must be a criminal. And these things, this fear works. And it works because he has created a cult. He has created an extremist caucus of people in America. I don't know if the number is what we saw at the ballot box, but it certainly is a large number. It's 30 or 40%, whatever that number is. And people that you think are most intelligent, when you have a slight conversation and inclination of what they're thinking about, you say, whoa. So for example, I'm in Georgia and I go in to get some groceries with my wife and in-laws, and I'm standing online. I'm talking to this woman who's delivering them, and she says, oh, it's so good to be back at work. So I don't know, there's something about my bon homie that invited her to say that. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, so why weren't you at work? And she said, well, I had a terrible illness, and so what I did was I thought I was going to be in a very bad situation, but the Affordable Care Act took care of me, and so now I'm able to be back at work. So then my organizing principle clicks in, and I say, so does that mean you're going to be supporting the Democratic ticket, Harris? And she says, well, why do you say that? I said, well, because Trump is opposed and had 30 some odd votes against it, and that benefit you enjoyed in terms of your health could go away if you can't afford medicine. She said, well, some of my friends have said that, but others said, I should be with Trump. That was a person who was, I guess, at least to me, undecided, but was leaning toward Trump, even though it meant her very health and the fact that she was back at work. Now, you could get down into the granular level and you could find thousands upon thousands of people like this. But those who are prepared to compromise what's best for them are operating on an emotional level.
That's a great story for that reason. I think that also speaks to the sort of tribalism and the social contagion that Trumpism has become,
Right.
and so that so much personal identity is tied up in that. I remember that one of the things you talked about in that day after the election, you mentioned this Ibsen play, and I'll tell you, I hadn't read Ibsen since college, and I mean, but so it kind of whipped my head around. Like I hadn't heard an Ibsen reference, and it's not important that you know Ibsen or anything, but the play's plot story is very much on this point that we're talking about right now. Would you mind just visiting that quickly? I thought it was really
sure.
effective.
No, I'd be glad to do it.
Yeah.
And you talk about reading things, and I, like you probably, I've read a great deal my whole life. That was part of my escape route out of the South Bronx, actually. And Ibsen is someone you read or hear years ago, but I visited from time to time, and this great actor Strong was in a play, reliving this play. So what is the play? The Enemy of the People. So you have as a key figure a person who is a medical man in charge of the spa that they have in this town. And at dinner, he discloses to his father and to the newsman in town. So you get the government, and you get the mayor, and you get the media. And he tells them he's got a medical report that shows the water is polluted. And so he's going to have to make a report on that. Okay, alarm. What does that mean to the economy of this village? They would rather have this toxic source and people coming and paying than have him correct it. Now, Ibsen is not going to allow us to have an easy way of it. So he gives character flaws to the doctor, mostly about vanity. I'm going to save him. That's going to be great. That's a good motivation. But he gets into it. Well, pretty soon he becomes the enemy for challenging their economic situation. So what you have is people not doing the right thing, like perhaps this vote we just had, and stronger than that, attacking those who disagree with them, the doctor, the medical man, and to the pain and suffering of the people who might come to that spa in the years ahead when they'll hire me. So this is, but that play, I thought, encapsulates a large portion of the drama that America is trying to get itself through. And I think the combination of me thinking of that and talking to people encouraged, as was your experience, as was my own in choosing it, that this explains what seems to be some sort of cognitive dissonance in us, that people could choose this guy who's a felon, a failed casino dealer, a shoddy builder in New York, a man who seeks vanity, a man who has no constraints, and whose hero is Roy Cohn, one of the worst lawyers in American history in terms of anything involving ethics or fair play. And so that story brings it all together. And there are a lot of things that do that. By the way, one thing I suggest to you is that when this comes upon you, I found that now I open up something I've read, like, say, Jimmy J., Joyce's Ulysses. I open up to a random page, read several pages, and think about it. And hopefully I remember it from the times I've read it before. But I think you can do that with any book. And what we bring to it is the context of our older age and our experience, that we see these things, like in Ibsen's Enemy of the People.
Oh, and clearly that's the case. I mean, it resonates and lands in a different way than it did when I read it when it was assigned reading. Right. Sandy says, I will never understand how people seem to have forgotten what it was like when Trump was president before. And also, they seem to have forgotten about January 6th. It is odd, the sort of voracious appetite that the news business has, and the news cycle just rolls things through so quickly that even big scandals and attempted coup sort of begins to fade.
Well, what it is Trump is not the first person to understand that the human body can take so many pieces of information at a time. So I've, in my lifetime, done some martial arts, nothing as severe as what I'm going to suggest. if you punch somebody once, they can usually absorb that. There are people, of course, that are much stronger than that. But in martial arts, they teach a number of things, and then the body breaks out of its rhythm and can't stand it. So if Trump in a day does 5 of the things that cause people's head to blow, like in Mars Attack, then you have a situation in which people are still resolving the first wave of nonsense and lying to his advantage when a second wave comes. And our hosts, let me narrow this down. And there have been the major talk shows on Sunday set up these interviews with Trump and others, and they come unprepared. They think it's enough to be there with a significant person, even though they're on notice that he's going to probably come up with these 4 things, and you should be ready to comment on them or not invite him. And if you're not ready to conduct the interview that way, you shouldn't have the interview. I was a kid who sat with my grandfather, and we watched the Talking Heads on Sunday, and we would scream at the TV set, "Ask him this! Why don't you ask him this?" And the same thing is true today. Now, my dad would tell me we were wasting our time, and my grandfather would get into it with him, and he'd say, well, maybe your dad is right, because he didn't want me to disrespect my father, not that I did. So that's the problem in America. We have, and he's easy TV, radio, or whatever, because he's always doing ridiculous stuff, and people just enjoy it like it's a prank, because they start with the belief that at the bottom, he's going to get all those people that are keeping us down. There's a cartoon I once saw, which is a man and woman in bed with all the bedding pulled up against them, and he's turning to her and says, the reason in our marriage that we have problems is because of those gays. That's it. That's his follower to the T.
Right. But blame the others. And you made me think of this. This is important. I think this is an important thing going forward. People should always remember the Steve Bannon quote. Whoa. Bannon was in federal court, and he revisits this occasionally in one form or another. But the quote is, "The Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit." That's the Bannon business model. Flood the zone, stink up the joint, and, it's not about the persuasion. It's about the disorientation. If you blow enough of this stuff out, it's a challenge to even the most prepared interviewer or the most prepared situation with podcasting. So I think that was I don't know that Trump needed to be taught that lesson. I feel as though he kind of already had it, but Bannon really makes it high art.
Well, and he does. And Bannon is the architect of this. He's the Herr Führer, creator of this character who, whatever skills he had, he appreciates what Bannon is telling him. So he goes from a somewhat liberal Democrat into this heinous individual. And when the Democrats were saying country over party, what we were really talking about was we were talking about power over party, Republican, Democrat, Independent, or anything. Bannon is about pure power. And whatever message or device gets us to the point where they're in control, that's it. And so they have the elements of chaos which allow them to exist. But now they're going to be in a position of having to deliver. And when I say deliver, I don't think they're interested in actually governing. That's the problem. They believe in no government. So they would rather have us wander through a dystopic landscape in the cities of America and everybody live in the suburbs. And soon be like 1984, fewer words, less thought, screaming every day, all of the kinds of things that Orwell was writing long before the situation we find ourselves in. And people like Oswald Spengler wrote how we were going to come, he's writing in the 1920s, how we were going to come to a point like this and we were going to lose democracy. And of course, Gibbons did that scribble in his Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. And so we're still a young democracy, and this guy wants to kill it in just slightly out of the cradle.
Right. No, in its youth for sure. Let's just visit this real quick before I let you go, John Flannery.
Okay.
SRT writes, I watched Vigilantes Inc. yesterday. We had Greg Palast on, and he's a friend of the show. It seemed like Trump suppressed his way into the White House. Is anything that can be done before January? And Phineas also says, people voted, the vote was suppressed and gerrymandered. Well, the gerrymandering is the good old-fashioned American thing, but the voter suppression, which is also a good old American thing, it may have been taken to a level that might have influenced the election. I mean, Palast talked to us about millions of votes being shedded this time. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a couple. One of them is that, first of all, disinformation, the notion in information science is garbage in, garbage out. If the basis of your decision is garbage, then your decision can't improve that. It doesn't get better because of it. And so we had an epidemic of that across America. It's similar to what we were just talking about. But if I could put together a study, what it would be is to take all the precincts in the nation in 2020 and all the precincts in the nation in this recent election, 2024, and run a series of data inquisitions that go something like this. What are the patterns? So, for example, do I find a drop of Democratic votes characteristically in the 7 battleground states and an increase of Trump in those places? In other words, you look for patterns that don't make sense. People feel it. I understand that. They may be right. We know the man. And it strikes us as very unusual that the national vote, in terms of the general support, non-electoral, has Trump so far ahead. And that just feels like his vanity. Now, it may not be. I mean, I know it takes care of his vanity, but it feels like his vanity. And so, like most things that come out, it will come out down the road, unfortunately. But somebody with better coding skill than I have in my older age should sit down and work this database out and do that. The database exists, and I think it's just a matter of writing SQL questions and things like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are definitely those who are spring-loaded for that kind of task and who have, ramped up technically that way. It does appear that there was... well, I mean, I can make the argument both ways. It appears, based on our conversations with Palast and others, that there were millions who were disenfranchised. Those are not, nothing numbers. Those those are in Pennsylvania, for example. There were huge numbers. I mean, numbers that would have changed the outcome potentially. At the same time, I look at New Jersey and New York, places that Trump wasn't going to carry, and I see that Trump has numbers that went up in a sense, correspondingly. So you kind of can't look at things and go, hey, dude, they were just playing the swing states. They were also playing these other states then also to the same extent. So again, I've divided mind on this. Maybe I have a normalcy bias. I want to believe that everything was on the up and up. But the more I see, the more there are legit questions.
I think there are. And, what you point out is... people said, why did he go to New York? And to some of my esteemed friends and colleagues, I said, well, I think he didn't expect to carry New York, but what he was doing was setting up the Congress and the Senate votes, especially the Congress. And that would be a different study to see who came out in the wash. Now that, if I understand what's happened, I think they now have 218 votes for Republicans. So there'll be a narrow margin, but they'll still be in control. It'll be held to make it work. And the trouble when you have the president and the House of Congress on both sides of the hill, all of the same party, you're more likely to have internecine fighting. And Trump has already tested it by asking the senators to give up their right to advise and consent to nominees. Now, that's a constitutional power. And it's one thing when it's been used tactically. Ask Obama, because he had a Supreme Court case that said he colored outside the rules. And it's interesting if they would give away that kind of power initially when they still don't know how Trump is going to lead, which I believe will be different. And I think that these day-by-day announcements of people in his cabinet are to make us think, oh, it's hopeless, we can't do anything. Well, that's not true. There are people in this large nation who have the number on each of these people and what they do and what they fail to do and whether they're competent to do it, right up to and including RFK Jr.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, and that for next time. I mean, and look, this cake still has to be baked, but it does look as though the ingredients are, I don't know, there's some poisonous ingredients in there, and I hope it is all survivable. John Flannery, I don't know, you lift my spirits, and I think these visits will be really beautiful. So let's do more of them. Okay.
I'd
pal?
love to. I'd love
All
to.
right.
It's great visiting with you. Take care.
Yeah. Enjoyed it too. John Flannery, everybody. Love it. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. I just love a little piece of John Flannery once in a while. I think it's a great thing. He does his vlogs too, you know, where he's those are really what I'm referring to when I talk about those walks he takes. Yeah,
I
he's really
watched
great.
one of his walks. He was kind of walking along this trail in New York, and it is really calming. I like him.
Yeah, he's good. So he'll be back. He's really cool to stop in, and I hope he'll be back. And we talk about, you know, the future, and you talk about these appointments when it comes to the new Trump administration, and we talk about, I think, also the notion that we're going to lose the democracy. We just made reference to it, and I also think we have to change our understanding of what that's going to be, about what fascism and despotism is. It's not the black and white movies of them all walking in, you know, in lockstep through the streets. It's not quite the SS of the Nazis. I mean, there may be some arm of the military that Trump powers up. It's going to be, I think, kind of the illiberal democracy that you have in Hungary. I think that's really what we're looking at. If you look at Hungary, you see the ways in which the opposition and even media opposition has been taken care of. The dry cleaning, essentially, of the culture and the political culture of any pushback. I think that's what we're looking at increasingly. So it's a kind of gangster regime that Trump is ushering in. And I think when you
heard it said that way before, that is perfect. A gangster regime. That is absolutely what it is.
And that is really what Trump is. He's the top gangster. So I would watch for more and more developments along those lines. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of democracy we're going to have, an illiberal democracy where rights are taken away and opposition is eliminated. So I'd watch for that.
Do people get so entrenched in that they can't find their way out of it? I'm looking 2 years down the road to midterms and 4 years down the road to the next presidential election. And do we get sucked so deeply into this that we can't find our way back from it? Or do we become disillusioned? How does it, how does this work as far as psychologically over time?
Well, I mean, psychologically over time and practically over time are two different questions. I mean, psychologically, it is true. And I liked his reference to George Orwell, because it is essentially a withering of people to the point psychologically that they just don't have it in them anymore. It's just noise. That's the Bannon thing. I thought Flannery was good in kind of talking about the sort of the effects of that over a longer period of time. From a practical standpoint, it is just as bad, because once you have what is effectively this illiberal democracy where the rights have been taken away, and you have this gangster regime that I'm talking about, where you have, it may not be Trump in charge, it'll be a new gangster in charge, but they have things so mobbed up in all the ways that we are beginning to see that it's very hard to turn it back. I mean, it really is. Now, again, we have some distance between here and there, and I do think even within that atmosphere that I just described, there are ways in which you can make progress on things you care about. I mean, there's the old line, all politics is local, and that's true. Mm-hmm. Your community, your school board, where your kids go, these are things that you can control. So don't get too distracted with the bleak future that you may see at the federal level and, even at the county level, because your politics, the politics of your life, begin in your house. So how you comport yourself there and the way in which you make decisions there really does matter, and it has a ripple effect. So that is the encouragement I would offer again. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
Albert, what do you want to do? Is it Kim's News? Is
Never
that
heard
next?
you be more optimistic in my life. That was fantastic. Mark Thompson, a ray of sunshine. What
Yeah, I know.
happened?
Normally, I'm pretty. I don't have a lot of faith in people or in systems.
Albert, thank you.
Albert, what am I
Wonderful.
doing? Am I doing some Kim News? Do I have to read anything? I mean, in terms of comments.
Well, yeah, so we could get to that after. So we could
Okay,
just come
so
in.
comments after. Again, thanks to John Flannery. I hope he'll be back. And thanks everybody for hitting the like button in the world of YouTube. You know, smashing the like button is a big
with your iron rod.
is a big deal. Helps us in the algorithms of YouTube. Kim's News, and then we continue. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And it is official. NBC News is projecting Republicans will keep control of the House. Republicans keep the House very narrowly with a small majority. The win gives President-elect Trump an easier path to enact his policies now that the Senate is also under GOP control. Speaking of the Senate, South Dakota's John Thune is now leading Senate Republicans. Thune and Texas's John Cornyn faced off in a secret vote after Florida's Rick Scott was eliminated in the first round ballot for Senate Majority Leader. Thune replacing Kentucky's Mitch McConnell, who was stepping aside as Republican leader. And as we saw earlier, it's a peaceful transition of power, a handshake by the fireplace at the White House. President Biden and President-elect Trump concluding their meeting at the White House. They sat in the Oval Office today for about 2 hours. That had to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Both spoke of a peaceful transition of power. They shook hands. Biden gave his congratulations.
Trump took some documents on the way out, or
One for this pocket, one for that pocket.
There's still a couple that I left behind that I meant to grab.
A jury is awarding $42 million to 3 Iraqis who suffered electric shocks, beatings, and other abuse at the infamous Abu Ghraib prison. That prison, operated by the U.S. military after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, was kind of put into the spotlight after revelations about the abuse there at the hands of American prison handlers. Tuesday's judgment was against defense contractor CACI, Premier Technology, which continues to deny involvement in any crimes at that prison and blames the reckless actions on a group of military police. President-elect Trump is selecting billionaire Elon Musk and former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy to lead the new Department of Government Efficiency. Trump claims the two will pave the way for the administration to dismantle government bureaucracy and restructure the federal agencies. Musk, who of course is the CEO of Tesla and social media platform X, SpaceX as well, says this will send shock waves through the system and anyone involved in government waste.
I'm sure it will. I mean, it takes balls to appoint the richest man in the world with massive government contracts between SpaceX, Tesla, even the Boring Company, relationships to the U.S. government. I mean, massive commitments, and regulatory agencies that are suing Elon Musk for everything from fouling the environment to tax evasion. It takes balls to put a guy like that essentially in charge of the entire government. He can streamline wherever he wants. So he can go after the agencies that are regulating him.
Oh, conflict
and by
of
the
interest,
way,
anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, getting rid of those regulations, I call them protections when it comes to the environment. I mean, we are talking about the spoiling of pristine habitats. That's what his SpaceX is doing. I mean, I know it's really cool. Technology is a great thing, but it has to be done in some kind of harmony with the environment around it. And Musk does none of that. So anyway, Trump putting him in charge with Vivek Ramaswamy, who is really playing the chess game of politics in America to the next point. And they're both huge election deniers. Vivek Ramaswamy and you can get lost in how articulate Vivek Ramaswamy is. He's one of those tech bros who's really good at this. And you can lose the fact that he is a total election denier. He will absolutely sing from whatever hymnal Trump has served him. And so he passes the loyalty test, and he's allowed to run amok with Elon Musk all over government. I mean, this is just, it's really insane to me. And the last thing I'll say about this is that businessmen think that government has to run like a business. It has to run with a P&L sheet. And you know what? It doesn't. There are a lot of things in government where you will lose money. There are a lot of programs that, again, don't pencil out. It's not a business. So you can't bring a businessman's mind purely to everything in government. I'm really alarmed by this appointment. But again, there are a lot of strong personalities here. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. There could be some pretty big fighting in this administration.
Kind of what I was thinking. They're supposed to be co-leaders of this new Department of Efficiency. Who's really in charge? Is it Elon or is it Vivek?
A lot of big egos. A lot of big egos.
For Florida, forecasters are monitoring this disturbance in the Caribbean. Hurricane Hunter aircraft due to investigate this today. It's become a tropical depression in the next couple of days. It likely will be, then a tropical storm. Forecast models show it could become a hurricane with various points in Florida as possible landfall sites. So here we go again. There's a new study by the Cleveland Clinic and the University of Southern California that reveals COVID can be deadly for years after getting sick. Well, this is great news for all of us, right? The study shows that those who get COVID are twice as likely to suffer a fatal heart attack, stroke, or death for up to 3 years after a COVID diagnosis. The risk even higher for those who were hospitalized with COVID or have a previous history of heart disease. Dr. Stanley Hazen of the Cleveland Clinic says there's likely to be a rise in cardiovascular disease globally in the coming years.
This is one of the things that concerned me about COVID. I mean, you know, they said it was just a cold, but the more I read, first about long COVID, which can have all kinds of effects on your mind and your ability to, you know, process information, et cetera. But the other thing is this inflammation that occurs all over the body. And people who were anti-vaxxers complained about the vax causing it. But the reality is that the disease, COVID-19, is what really caused all this inflammation and heart issues and, as I say, the long COVID. So the risks associated with getting COVID-19, it seemed to me to far exceed any risks with the vaccine at the time. And as it turns out, I don't know how effective the vaccine was with all the different variants. I mean, we had COVID twice here in my house. So this does concern me, the involvement of, you know, cardiovascular system.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. In the Bay Area, there's been a big battle over an airport name. They want to rename the Oakland International Airport, and the fight now is continuing about this in the courts. A federal judge granting the city of San Francisco's injunction against the Oakland Airport, calling itself San Francisco Bay Oakland International Airport. The judge found the new name, which the airport started using months ago, would cause irreparable harm to the San Francisco's own airport. Oakland airport officials for now can't use the new name in any promotions or advertisements. They're saying they're going to keep fighting this in court. So
the name Oakland is a bad brand. Just give me the truth is saying, is that indeed the case?
Well, there's a lot of crime on Hagenberger leading to the Oakland airport, right?
Well, Hagenberger's a bad brand. I'll give you that.
Hagenberger, now you're your friend. But the Oakland folks say no one knows where Oakland is, that it's confusing to travelers. They don't realize how close to San Francisco. The San Francisco International Airport folks say if you put San Francisco in your name, people will be really confused because there will be two airports on either side of the bay that say, in some form, San Francisco International Airport. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just reading the comments. Shadow producer Calvin Wong says, new name for Oakland, Crime Town. That really wouldn't. Oakland Hills is lovely, and that's really true, Julie says.
I think it's more for the folks who are booking flights going into, they want to visit the Bay Area, and they're just going to go to the wrong airport, and then they're not going to have anything set up for them that they originally planned. So I think it's just confusing.
Yeah, it does seem confusing to me as well. John Watson says they should rename Oakland And then they can just rename the airport after whatever they've renamed Oakland.
There you go.
Sure,
Perfect
it's just
solution.
common sense, of course. Anyway, all right.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
All right.
Students at a Southern California high school are sticking up for their teacher over remarks made against President-elect Donald Trump. Nearly 100 students at Valley View High in Moreno Valley took part in a walkout. They left class Tuesday for about an hour to support that teacher. The teacher in question was recorded making negative comments about Trump to students in a classroom the day after the election. That teacher is now on administrative leave pending an investigation. Students who walked out say the teacher is a great educator and shouldn't be fired despite those comments. And lastly, I know, something to take your mind off your troubles. Actor John Krasinski is People Magazine's sexiest man alive for 2024.
What?
The Office star and the man behind A Quiet Place was revealed as the winner last night on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The 45-year-old joked he thinks it's going to result in him having to do more household chores, but he's willing to take the cons with the pros.
Can you get me a picture of him, Albert? Just
John
while we're
Krasinski.
talking about him? There he is.
There he is.
Yeah.
Sexiest man alive for
I mean,
2024.
it's sexy is about, more than just the physical, right, Albert? I mean, you've always explained to me that it's a combination of things. It's how you carry yourself and
Sure.
your creative vision and your
brain.
mojo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got, I guess, he's got quite a following. He's certainly a creative dude, right?
He's pretty good looking.
Yeah. He's married to Emily Blunt. He's not my type, but he is married to Emily Blunt. He, I mean, it was like, oh, there he is. Yeah, that's pretty, with the shirt off. He's, I can see where you might,
I know there's some questionable people like Selena Gomez's boyfriend, Benny Blanco, he is not good looking at all, made that list. So I stopped paying attention to that list.
Yeah, Albert feels the list.
Albert, thank you.
Has been manipulated by Starlink. And
Is that what
he
it
does
is?
not
Yeah.
accept the voting. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
All right.
John Krasinski, sexiest man alive.
All right.
There are some good things that happened in 2024. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. I've got the vanilla tea in my cup. Oh, is it good? There's some holiday tea as well.
They've got some holiday packages working. That's right.
Blueberries, and there's holiday coffee and all kinds of specials. You can get your exclusive Mark Thompson Show discount by typing in the code at checkout Mark T. So anything you see on the website there, you get an automatic 10% off just for being a Mark Thompson Show listener. What's in your cup?
I'm a big fan of Coachella Valley coffee. I encourage everybody to check it out. Best coffee I've ever tasted. And I mean, especially if you get a discount, I mean, that's pretty strong. And 10% ain't nothing. So anything on the website, go for it.
I feel like if they stopped sponsoring the show tomorrow, I would still have a really tough time not ordering this tea. I love it. So I'm not drinking it just because they're a sponsor. I'm drinking it because it's my thing now.
There's the holiday blend that Albert has up right now. Yeah. And I think that he was mentioning the other day when Cliff was on, he was mentioning that there are things that they will actually, like if you're sending it as a gift, they have a special gifting thing, and then they'll put a card in. Remember, he said, was
What's
explaining.
interesting is I was poking around on the website and I was looking for the special, because one of the gifts I want to give is that I have some tea drinkers in my family, and I wanted to give the selection of holiday teas, and it's not on the website, but if there is a spot on the website to contact, and I think if you send a message, you can probably order it that way.
That's it. You just contact them and they'll work it out with you. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And they're so nice, so nice.
Yeah. Good stuff. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Again, it's Mark T at checkout for 10% off. Fresh beans. It is fresh, new crop. And that's the reason the beans are so special. Hand roasted. They're tasting notes on all of it. I really recommend that you check them out and give it a run. You'll be very, very happy.
And that is the news. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
Use Mark Thompson.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and for supporting the show in all the ways you do. We've picked up some subscriptions, which, subscribers to the show. It's free to subscribe to the show, of course. We're here every day for you. And
how many do we have now?
I don't know. I think it's like 63,000 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And our core, I will reiterate here at the end of the show, and I'll mention it from time to time. I haven't mentioned it all day. 66,000. Wow, there you go. 66,000.
What?
I know. We're a show that began as a radio show, as you know, and then we moved here to YouTube, and we're so excited to be able to work with a lot of different professionals who come through our midst, and also to be able to share with you, the community that has supported the show from the beginning, to share our growth, and we know the people in our chat, we know the people on our Patreon and PayPal, and really that core group that brought us here and supported us, they are really the OGs, and I'm really grateful to everyone who is part of that group. And of course, super stickers and super chats every day as well are part of that success.
I have a little bit of breaking news.
What is that?
Trump has just nominated Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General.
Wow, that is that's crazy.
I'm sorry I didn't have it for the newscast, but holy macaroni, man.
Wow. That is absolutely wild. Gaetz, who has ethics investigations swirling around him, that is just unreal. But that really speaks in a naked way to the fact that Trump wants loyalists in these positions and does not care about anything else. You will do what I tell you to do. You will go after who I tell you to go after. You will turn the Justice Department in any direction I tell you to turn it. That's what this nomination says. It is a clear indication of something that we've talked about for some time. But Gaetz, who again has struggled with questions around these parties, the trafficking of an underage girl, all of these things really were entered into ethics investigations, and they have not been resolved. So the idea that Gaetz would be the Attorney General, wow, what a great way to clean your record of anything and to go after your enemies.
You know those movies where, like the high school movie where there's the rich guy that's mean? There's always like that one character.
Sure.
It's like they grabbed all of them from every mean guy, the meanest of the mean guys from, every frat party in America, and dumped them in the White House. That's what it feels like.
No, I mean, Matt Gaetz is that guy. I mean, he's sort of the junior bully to Trump's senior bully, and we'll have to see, again, how this all comes together.
Wow.
But, and this is interesting, too. Wes makes this point. It's not a bad point to be made. Gaetz, that means one less Republican in the House, and for every nomination coming out of the House. It's true. Thank you for that super chat. Calvin also says, more political prosecutions by Trump, the sequel. Thanks, America. It gets worse daily, says Karen. The very worst people in the most sensitive jobs, says Nullifidian. We are now all effed up now, America, thanks to the voters, says Mindy. Yeah. The Republican politicians will go along. Of course, that's true. I mean, they are, I think, and, this is the thing I was talking about in Hungary. This same kind of thing happened, which is a taking over of a political party to the point that you really don't have any mechanism to beat it back any longer. That's what I was talking about with sort of a gangster regime.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Eve says, I'm ill from all of this. This is causing major USA citizen shock damage, like super duper real trauma, she says.
Yeah.
We need docs online. They have offered, I've seen it online, some various programs and mechanisms to kind of chill you out. I don't know, you have to pick the manner of chill out that makes, sense for you.
We're gonna do a chill out next on the after party. But I did get a request today for your show to have some type of psychologist on talking about the ways to cope in the next 4 years.
Well, it's funny. I was approached by my friend who we had her on before. She did a book about different ways in which you can kind of square up your life. And she's very good with this sort of thing. Maybe we'll have her on, at least for starters. So I'll put you together with her, and maybe you can help make it happen. But this Gaetz nomination is brutal, and I'm sure, and it just follows in a list of brutal nominations that we are seeing out of this man who knows nothing, wants to know nothing, wants to go play golf, has on the agenda, I think, trying to go after his enemies, trying to pursue various vengeful strategies, but apart from that, he doesn't really care. He really doesn't. So those in charge will be many of the people that you're seeing. So we'll talk more about it tomorrow. David Katz will be here. I mean, David Katz, when it comes to the law, is just so brilliant. So we'll talk about the attorney generalship and that appointment. And as I say, it may be a just part of the rude awakening that we're having to deal with. In any case, I'm just looking at the Trump chooses Tulsi Gabbard. Did you see this? For Director of National Intelligence?
I didn't see the Gabbard.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was too preoccupied with Matt Gaetz.
I heard that there's a push to remove Mike Johnson on day one, says No Contendo. I mean, I do think there's going to be a lot of infighting. Now, Trump may be able to come in like daddy, because he does have a lot of political capital and chill stuff out. But some of the stuff that's going to be going on is going to be going on in his administration. Randy says Trump chooses Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. I didn't. You're checking on that, right, Albert?
Yeah,
Somebody?
I am. Yeah, it's true.
A third apartheid, a third Nazi Germany, a third incompetent QVC clown show. That's Trump's America. Yeah, thank you, Luis. I can't really disagree.
So Tulsi Gabbard is a veteran. She is an honorary co-chair of Trump's transition team and now the Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah. I'm not a fan. As you know, I think she's been dining out on her military service, which I do, I am impressed by. But I don't know what else she brings to the table. And she is very friendly toward Russia. This is pretty much a flank of people, her among them, or maybe head of the list, very anti-Ukraine funding. It's like they cloak themselves in a pacifism, but I'd suggest that there isn't quite the pacifism that they cloak themselves in, because if you look at where they are, I mean, they're backing fascist dictators, in this case, Putin, in the example of Russia. Canadian border needs a wall. Canadians paying for it, says No Contender. Yeah. Walls don't work. They weren't able to keep Cancun Ted out of Mexico, says Luis. Yeah. Marilyn with a super sticker. How about something for Marilyn? She sent us a $10 $9.99 super sticker. Big shout out. Marilyn, thank you. Scott Rittenberg. I'm with Keenan and Company, referring to the SNL Open. What did they do on the SNL Open? I watched it and I've forgotten.
It was kind of this, I think it was this thing where they had all the staff members there talking about, contrition to Trump and how, they hadn't been saying anything negative about Trump. Oh, no, not us.
I see. Yeah, that's the way I'm going to be soon. Wow, I love it. God, who knew? I was really wrong. He's terrific.
Yeah, exactly.
The deplorables have a blank check for the next 2 years. Most of these people won't last, that's Angry Hippie says that. Most of these people won't last, says Champagne Wishes. Been there. We need a cult expert, too, to help us with cult mentality, says Rain. I'm reading a book about cults. I was reading it for quite a while, and then I'm reading a bunch of different things right now. So,
what's the interview process like for the Trump administration? How do they really ferret out whether someone has no moral compass?
Kiss the ring, says
What's the question you ask for that?
Well, it's not MAGA Mickey, Trump 2024. Yeah, I forgot about MAGA Mickey.
Trump 2024!
Yeah, MAGA Mickey's got to be happy. Yeah. Dr. Bandy Lee has been talking about how Trump's mental illness has now become an American public mental health crisis. Yeah, that's what David K. Johnston was saying yesterday, actually. The lunatics are taking over the asylum, says Blue Spark. Yeah. Well, it's a sad fact, but these are the issues and the information we're dealing with, and I must tell you that, Dave says, have you ever kicked a puppy? Okay, you're in. That's the interview. Yeah. But it definitely. I'm just looking at these various comments, and stealing children's candy. That's how they decide who can be in the cabinet. All right, I think we get the idea. That's
The Mark Thompson Show.
Albert, I have enjoyed our time here. Sadly, we must conclude, from what I'm told. The After Party Live is Kim's answer to this show. She puts salve in the wounds that are established from this show. That's why she calls it the After Party. I want to thank you, Albert.
Albert, thank you.
For putting this show together, and really thank you, Kim, for putting the show together. Kim,
how are you?
Kim is really like the pre-show producer. Albert is like the in-the-moment and then post-show producer. It takes two people to run this thing. Face it, Trump will be running the country from the fairways, but not in any fair ways. I get it. Thank you, Michael D. Sorry, I botched the read initially. Face it, Trump will be running the country from the fairways, but not in any fairways. I got it. Love it.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
The After Party Live next. Thanks, everyone. Tomorrow, David Katz and more.